And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird presented by Osmo.com, brought to you in part by Yahoo DFS. We'll get to them momentarily. Dan Strever, Chris Randone with you on this Monday morning, late Sunday night. For those of you tuning in early, hopefully your NFL tilts are not too bad, and you can take the time to look at the MLB slate with us. Chris, how the hell are you doing?
Doing great, man. Ready for to talk about Coors Field because you know how we love to attack it. So yeah, looking forward to this 7-game slate.
Yeah, it's a 7-gamer on Monday as we have the dwindling MLB season. We'll be with you through to the end, talking baseball. And then obviously as we transition towards the NBA, there'll be a little bit of downtime in between. We'll figure out some things to talk about. Maybe Chris and I can talk a little Bachelor. We'll figure something out. We'll figure something out along the way. But maybe we can do a quiz of some sort about favorite TV shows. But we'll figure it out. We'll get there, and we'll get into NBA as that is just around the corner. NFL clearly in full swing. Don't forget, use the promo code EARLYBIRD for 50% off your first month at Osmo.com. Get your projections, ownership projections, gets you a lineup builder, and so much more that is available to you with a membership. So 7-game slate. It starts with Strasburg and Sonny Gray at the top. Jose Berrios gets the White Sox. Probably put a pin in that one. Robbie Ray against the Miami Marlins in Arizona. He did have a bullpen session on Saturday. He's been dealing with a blister on the left middle finger. It said that is the reason why his last 2 starts have been on the negative side, but we'll have to wait and see and make sure he is good to go. So we have Strasburg against St. Louis, a team that just wins somehow. I'm not really sure. I've said in the past, I'm pretty sure Cardinals invoke some sort of black magic that just make things work for their lineup. Even when they're not pitching well or hitting well, they just compile these win totals that seem absolutely outlandish. But here they are this season, 2019, getting the job done again in the Central in the National League. They are 2 games up on the Cubs, 83 and 66. If you ask me, I can name some players, I can name pitchers on their staff, I can name their lineup. I don't know anyone who's having a great year there, and yet here they are with a very fine record. They're going to go into the playoffs most likely. Obviously, things can change over these final few games of the regular season, but we have a matchup here between Strasburg and the St. Louis Cardinals. 11-8 for Strasburg. First glance feels a bit expensive, but how do you feel about Strasburg in this matchup with the Cardinals, right-hander on the mound against what can be a pretty balanced lineup for St. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting. St. Louis is in first, and we don't know how. I mean, they compile wins together, and you would think like the Cubs or the Brewers would definitely be ahead of them. But when it comes to this game and Strasburg, I mean, he's 11-8 on DraftKings, and Strasburg to me is someone who I don't necessarily look at as a top tier pitcher per se. So I feel as if that maybe him and Sonny Gray should reverse roles here as far as price, just the way that the season has been going. But I don't know. I think what I'm going to do is to see what the ownership is like on Strasburg, because when you do look at this slate, and especially if Robbie Ray doesn't pitch against Miami at home, you're really left with no quote-unquote kind of superstar pitcher or all-star pitcher at least. But when it's 11-8, you know, I expect like a Bieber or a Kershaw. But, you know, when it's Strasburg, it's like I go back and forth and you know, I juggle this question. But I think rostering him at 11-8 will only be based on ownership and to see what type of projection he has come near the slate. So, yeah, I you know, St. Louis doesn't strike out much, and there's like about 6 hitters in that lineup that strike out less than 20%. So it's also a tough matchup too when you think about it from a strikeout perspective. So I don't know necessarily if I'm kind of in on Strasburg yet. It's a wait and feel type of thing.
I'm right there with you, and I think that this lineup, you look across, you made mention of strikeout percentage. You do have Carpenter and Goldschmidt over 24%, Bader in there as well. Then you get into the Wieters and De Jongs and Ozunas of the world, sub 22%, or sub 23%, I should say. So not the easiest matchup for Strasburg, and you made mention of Sonny Gray. Now he gets a matchup with the Chicago Cubs. I wouldn't say that is exactly an easy lineup to get through either. Tons of left-handed power, 22.8% K percentage against righties, WRC plus of 103, ISO of 199. Obviously, there are question marks here for this Cubs lineup. I actually got real-time injury updates. My brother was at the Cubs game when Rizzo got injured, so I got the text right away of someone got in. He's not a baseball fan. He goes, someone got injured right in front of me. I'll find out who. We found out it was Rizzo. Said he twisted his ankle, and now the X-rays have come back negative. They obviously need Rizzo. This is the Cubs stretch run, trying to solidify either the Central or the wild card. So you don't know that they'll hold him out here if he feels like he's ready to go. Obviously, an ankle sprain can be a difficult injury to come back from, especially for a lefty trying to use that as your pivot foot, and especially for a first baseman too, doing the work over at first base. But I'd assume he'd be in the lineup. That clearly plays a little bit on how good Gray can be. But if you've listened to the shows here at Awesemo.com, you know Adam, I know Chris has been on him, I've been on him. Sonny Gray's really good against lefties. Like, this is something he's done all season long. Do you trust Gray against what should be a more power-potent lefty lineup because of the numbers we've seen all year? Or is the price point too high and you'd rather find somebody a bit cheaper?
No, I mean, I would trust Sonny Gray here. However, though, I just looked, and I believe Kevin Gausman is starting now.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think there's been either a change or something took place, but multiple sites have Kevin Gausman across the board.
All right, let me refresh.
This just happened as I was looking up some statistics. So yeah, and I went to a couple different sites just to get the confirmation, and it looks like Kevin Gausman's starting.
All right, that's a horse of a different color, as they once said in The Wizard of Oz. Kevin Gausman, we've talked about many times over on this podcast. Let's see. Kevin Gausman will start for the Reds in their series opener against the Cubs tomorrow. Sonny Gray, Tyler Mahle, Luis Castillo, Anthony DeSclafani, and Trevor Bauer will follow in that order. So they're going to a 6-man rotation. So Gausman will start on Monday night. Well, that sucks because Kevin Gausman kind of sucks, but that changes the slate.
Kind of changes the slate drastically because now,
8,300, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now I think Berrios comes even more appealing, probably who we get into next. And
higher owned by far.
Yeah, and higher owned. So, like, this might leave Strasburg now on a lonely island to where do people pivot to Berrios or do they pay up to Strasburg? And so that'll be interesting to see kind of where the ownership swings.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think I was on Gray for the lefty matchup and potentially slightly deflated ownership because of it being the Cubs, but now we look at this matchup here for Jose Berrios. Now, Berrios has been pretty inconsistent this year. Well, pretty inconsistent is probably a little bit hyperbolic, but he's been fairly inconsistent. The walks have been a bit concerning. Hasn't seen the gigantic strikeout totals that you may want to see from a power pitcher. In fact, K per 9 of 8.60. That is not a strikeout pitcher. That is not somebody that you dub if you looked at just the raw numbers and said, hey, I want 10 plus K per 9 pretty much from my strikeout guys. But the walks, 2.29, home runs per 9, 1.19. But this matchup here, as you were saying, is with the Chicago White Sox. And Chris, we know the strikeout percentage is there. We know the power is lacking. Is this now SP1 for this slate?
Oh, man. I mean, it's really tough. But when you look at from a team perspective, Chicago White Sox in the last 2 months, I believe, since July 1st, 27.6% K rate, which is the highest in the league. So Berrios does have stuff, some great stuff at times. Like you said, he is inconsistent, but there's not much to fear in this White Sox lineup. Maybe once outside you get out of maybe Jimenez and Abreu and Moncada, like the top 3 or 4 guys, and then you go and trickle down to the bottom 5. I mean, there's a lot there where he can pick apart. So it is in Chicago, though, which is kind of scary. So seeing kind of where the wind blows will definitely have a factor. But when it comes to the matchup and the K rate being there, I mean, at the end of the day, Berrios, he does have strikeout stuff, and he'll be facing a team that does strike out a lot. So, I mean, the question is, he does have a 22.7 K rate. It's not as great, but I think that kind of is lifted a little bit when you do face a team that does strike out a lot. So I think what we should look at is where does the ownership go tomorrow? Do they pivot down since Sonny Gray is out to Berrios because of the matchup? Not necessarily the high strikeout rate that you would want, but he does have a low hard hit, does have a low xWOBA. So, but I think Strasburg in this situation might be the better play.
All right. We will have ownership projections over there at awesemo.com. They come out pretty early in the morning, get updated as lineups come out leading up to lock. We have live shows for you, of course, with the MLB strategy and the deeper dive. Also, remember, we have the NFL shows now mixing in there as well. So you'll want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, set that alarm bell so every time we go live, you get an alert. Leave comments on all the videos. Let us know what you like. Let us what you want more of as well. Let's go sub 10K. Going to throw these names at you, see who you like best. We have Robbie Ray. Let's assume he's healthy as he's going to be with this blister on his middle finger. Tanner Roark, Cole Hamels against Cincinnati, and then you have Dakota Hudson against the Washington Nationals for 8,100. We'll get sub 8K and below after this. Ray's a good pitcher, right? And this is a Miami Marlins team that we know doesn't have a ton of pop. Better from the right side than they are from the left, so you have to like somewhat the platoon advantage, but it's still a WRC plus of I think 80-something. I don't have the numbers up right now. I'll pull it up momentarily. An ISO in the 150s, I think, against lefties. So this would seem like a spot where Ray should be pretty good to go. I guess the injury is worth at least some pause. How do you feel about Ray, Roark, Cole Hamels, and Dakota Hudson?
Yeah, I mean, Robbie Ray, the only question is this blister. And obviously, as you know, as you throw the ball, it is sensitive and, your skin, so if his skin's not fully healed, do we have to worry about it becoming problematic again and him getting pulled or him all of a sudden giving up a ton of runs? But we can't kind of discredit his 30.9 K rate on the season. You mentioned a great point. Not much power in this Miami lineup. 167 ISO over the last few months, which is low bottom 5 in the league, and a 24.7 K rate. So the health, that's all we're questioning here. And if he's healthy and ready to go and it looks good, I love him. I think of these 9K guys, clearly matchup and K rate, he's in the best position possible.
All right. Anybody else in this range that you're in on, Roark, Hamels, or Hudson?
Hudson, he's been pretty solid from time to time lately. You can't really discredit what he's been doing. If you look over his last, I think it's 6 or 7 games, he's only given up 2 home runs and I think 6 earned runs. So he's been fairly well. And I mean, this is why St. Louis is winning with guys like Dakota Hudson and Flaherty, who's on the rise now as being a top pitcher in this league. So I think Hudson's in an interesting spot, but it's a Washington lineup that somehow knows how to produce runs, and it's a scary lineup to go against. There are Ks there. I would like to see what kind of lineup they roll out. But if I'm looking at these guys, I trust Robbie Ray the most. And if I'm looking to pivot from Robbie Ray, I would have to decide between probably Hamels or Roark.
Yeah, Hamels is a name that I'll come back to, I think. I don't know at first glance that I'm going to be completely in on him, but I do think this is a spot against the Reds. They have some righty power. You have Suarez and some other names there you have to be concerned with. But as we search for names with Gray not here, it'll be intriguing to figure out exactly where we go. As we get to sub 8K names, I will just say it's great to see Garrett Richards back in Major League Baseball. Garrett Richards was one of those guys from a season-long perspective. And yes, I talk season-long from time to time. I was on a couple of different years. Always looked like he was the next ace out there for the Angels. Then the injuries just mounted. Finally had Tommy John surgery. He's back. I don't expect him to throw more than 3 or 4 innings here. So I don't know that it's really going to be worthwhile to consider him at this price point. I'll check in on Yahoo and FanDuel momentarily. Maybe he's Min Sal there. At either of those sites where he becomes a bit more intriguing if he has the strikeout stuff going. But I just want to say I love seeing him. We have Mats. We have Reynaldo Lopez is all the way down to 6,800. Remember, this is the guy who last time out was $9,800.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I don't know if this exists, but I'd love to see the delta or variance, whatever you want to call it, on individual pitcher salaries mapped, because I think his would be the craziest mapping of prices because he's been all over the world this year on DK. But here he gets a matchup with the Minnesota Twins. We know this is a team that has a ton of power against righties on the year, 21.3% K percentage of 112 WRC plus, an ISO of 221. I like Reynaldo Lopez. I think there's some skill there that over time may make him a number 3 or 4 starter in Major League Baseball. But this seems like a blow-up spot. Any of these cheap guys, from Matz down to Senzatella, pique your interest in any way or feel like guys that we should at least consider simply because of cheap and potential matchup?
Matz is going to be facing Colorado, and they do strike out a lot against left-hand pitching, more so on the road. But, anytime you're going into Coors, it's definitely scary. However, there have been some games lately where there's been pitchers duels in Coors. And as much as I'm going to probably attack these offenses tomorrow, Matz is 7,200. He's a guy that can definitely get strikeouts. It's interesting. But when I look at everyone else, Reynaldo Lopez, I think I'm going to be on the other side with the Minnesota Twins and stacking against Reynaldo. He's someone who has a high home run and fly ball rate. He gives up power. And you're looking at Minnesota, who is one of the best right-handed pitching teams in baseball. So definitely going to be a great stack there going against Reynaldo. Zach Davies, he let me down last time because he had, put together 2 good starts. But at 6,100 at home against the Padres, I feel like that's not necessarily a bad option.
Yep.
I feel like he's definitely in a good spot because of the price point. So I could see a lot of people gravitating to him for that reason. San Diego, we talked about Chicago being the highest strikeout rate team in baseball the last 2 months since July 1st. Well, right behind them is the San Diego Padres at 27.2%. So Zach Davies, not your, top quality type of strikeout pitcher, but there are strikeouts there at 6,100. If he can get through 4 or 5 innings, get a few strikeouts, that is a guy that we want to roster as an SP2 on DraftKings.
Yep. I think that's the right call. You get Sparkman against Oakland. Hopefully he gets lit up, because anytime Glenn Sparkman is part of the conversation, I die a little inside. But over on FanDuel, just to point out, you do have Berrios at just 8,500. Now, that's cheaper than Hudson Ray Gray, who's no longer on the slate, and Steven Strasburg. So a little bit cheaper than he is on DK. We'll also point out Garrett Richards is just 5,500 over there. So I don't think I'd roster him still. I think there's just too much of a question mark, but he is near bottom there. On Yahoo, let's see. Right, Richards is $33, so it doesn't feel comfortable there. Sonny Gray is still listed. Berrios is $40 compared to Strasburg at $52. I think it comes down to ownership, right? You're playing cash games. You're going to want to be on Berrios. You're going to probably be on Davies. That's probably your pairing as of right now, with maybe some Hamels discussion, depending on how you feel about him against Cincinnati. Tournament. Oh, sorry. And Robbie Ray. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Robbie Ray, not Hamels. Robbie Ray against Miami, along with Berrios and Davies. Strasburg, I think, is an interesting tournament pivot, depending on ownership, with that high price point. And then you have to start to talk about the Hamels and other guys mixed in. Any final thoughts on pitching before we do hit on some of the favorite bats or favorite stacks that we might have against these pitchers?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you on Richard. It's definitely nice to see him back. However, though, he's thrown, not so much over the last 4 seasons because of this elbow issue. And we don't know exactly what his pitch count will be, but I think you were right. I think it might be 3, maybe 4 innings max. And at 7,600 on DraftKings specifically, it's not a good option. And I don't think he'll get you enough points on FanDuel either. So it's nice to see him back, but I don't think it'll be nice to kind of roster him in this type of situation.
All right, let's talk some offense here quickly. Obviously, Coors Field heavily in play. The over-under in that one is 13.5. Steven Matz could have some strikeouts, but he could also give up 5 home runs to Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado. Like that is a legitimate range of outcomes that could happen. Throw in the Desmonds of the world and the Hampsons, and this could be a really long day for Steven Matz. This is a guy on the year who's given up 1.42 home runs per 9. xFIP of 4.26 isn't terrible, but this just seems like a spot where he should be giving up the big flies to some of these guys. Obviously, the Mets on the other side against Senzatella stands out. You get Pete Alonso, Conforto, Nimmo. There's enough power in that Mets lineup to have a stack that you're comfortable with. What other offenses, though, for you? You mentioned maybe going with Minnesota against Reynaldo Lopez. What else do you like as maybe some other stacks or one-offs that you're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, love Minnesota. Anytime that you can roster them, and against Reynaldo Lopez, I feel like this puts them in a good spot. There's just so much power up and down that lineup, and it's really hard to kind of ignore them. So, Reynaldo Lopez, he is someone who 1.67 home runs per nine this year. He's a little bit above average when it comes to home run to fly ball rate, and there's a lot of great guys in this lineup like Garver, Polanco, Cruz, Crone. I mean, they attack right-handed pitching, so it's going to be difficult to not roster them. Another team you mentioned the Mets, clear as day. You got Senzatella is not going back to back. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. He pitched a good game somehow last time, but I think the time's going to come now where he's going to face Alonso, McNeil, Conforto. A lot of power in this lineup that I'm going to like to see in this matchup. So definitely will be a fan of them. And I think you mentioned another one is the Athletics. They're a team that's on the rise right now, probably going to make the playoffs. Last few months, 217 ISO at home, 125 WRC plus, a lot of power in that lineup. I think I love Olsen here. I love Simeon. I think Chris Davis has started to get kind of a groove back. But then, I mean, you got guys like Kana and Laureano. I mean, there's a lot of great hitters in this lineup, and Sparkman is a guy that you definitely want to attack. And I believe if we look real quick, he's got a 2.57 home run per nine and a 16.6% home run fly ball rate. So I love that call, and I could see myself going with a nice little Oakland Mets stack and flirting with Minnesota. So these are the offenses definitely I want to target tomorrow.
And to point out on DK specifically, Chris Davis still just $3,700. So a cheap price point there, depending on what other outfielders they run out there. You mentioned Laureano. There's also Robbie Grossman still on this team. He's $3,500 as a lefty bat against Sparkman. So you're going to have some options here with Oakland that I do think will stand out as big time options as you're trying to build out these lineups. There is a line on this 9.5 with Oakland. What do you think the money line is? Minus what in favor of Oakland? Do you have a quick guess?
Yeah, I would say 325.
320. Well done. Spot on. We should play this game more often. You have anything else stand out? 9.5 over under for Minnesota and White Sox. 9s for Detroit's a day game. And to point out for those of you who are listening, it is a 7:40 Eastern time lock. So first game of this night is at 7:40 p.m. So for those of you out there on the West Coast, 4:40 is your lock time. So it's not the typical 7:05 or 7 o'clock lock. So you have a little bit of extra time, and I'm sure we'll gauge our live shows accordingly there as well. NFL strategy will be mixed in there. We also have a live before lock for the showdown slate for Monday Night Football. So tons of content available for you over at awesemo.com. You'll want to check that out. Tomorrow morning is Emac and Adam on the DFS Early Bird. Then is myself and Lofty, Emac and Adam again, myself and Josh. And then it'll be me and Adam Saturday morning. I'm going to fill in for Emac as he is traveling this upcoming weekend. You get the full gamut of talented analysts over there on YouTube as well. So, Chris, any final thoughts on this slate or anything else on your mind that you'd love to share with our adoring fans?
No, I'm very excited. I like the late start, the 7:40 time. It's nice because I hate waiting for games to end. I like when games are kind of closer grouped together. So looking forward to it, man. Happy Sunday. And I hope everyone survived week 2 of NFL.
There you have it. We are going to talk to you tomorrow morning right here on the DFS Early Bird. Find Chris at Chris Randone on Twitter. Find myself at Dan Stratford. And, of course, it's Awesemo_com. With that said, best of luck on Monday slate. Back here tomorrow on the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com.